Hi, I'm Steve Duke, and this is the Two Roads podcast, the podcast that helps you find a job and a life that you love. Today, I had Jack O'Mara on the show. Now, Jack is the co-founder and CEO of Ochre Bio, a pretty successful startup that's focused on developing RNA therapies to treat liver disease. We don't talk about liver disease much on the show, but we do talk a lot about his life. Jack's a really impressive guy. He was recently named on Forbes 30 under 30, and with Ochre Bio, he's made some huge progress, raising I think over $40 million from investors like Coast Ventures and Y-Combinator. And so we chat about his journey from growing up in Ireland to going to college through to his first job in management consultancy and how he kind of went from there through to starting Ochre Bio. I think some of the things that we talked about that were particularly interesting was what that very first step looks like. Like, what did he tangibly do when he thought he might want to go and co-found a business? And I know that's a question that a lot of people have on their minds right now. What do you actually go? What's that very first step? And we talk a bit about that. We also talk about what life is like as a co-founder and as a CEO, what skills he thinks are most important, what his day looks like. I will give you a bit of a spoiler. The man works a lot, but we talk about why he does that. And it's clear that he's just super passionate about what he does. He's a very funny guy. He does do stand-up comedy, but I just had a really great conversation with the guy, and so I want to get into the conversation now, and I really hope you enjoy it. So Jack, the first question I actually always ask everybody, and I get some pretty interesting answers to this one, is when you were a kid, was there anything that you wanted to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a marine biologist for a long time. And then I wanted to be a PE teacher for a really long time. And then actually, my PE teacher pulled me when I was about to submit the CAO, which is the Irish college application. I had PE teaching number one on my list. And like the couple of days before we were pressing final submit and your fate was sealed, my PE teacher was like, "Don't fucking do it, man. Don't do it." And I was like, "What do you mean don't do it? It's the fucking best job in the world. You get to play football with people all day and sit on your arse." So then I said, okay, I better listen to him. And then I did biomedical engineering. And it would have been a very different life path for me.
That's so good. I feel like that's the best, career counseling that anybody has ever received.
It's like career counseling by prisoner vibe, yeah.
All right. So where was this PE teacher then? Tell me a bit about like where you grew up and what school was like for you then.
Grew up in a beautiful town by the name of Moat in Ireland. It's like it used to be called I think it's like the arsehole of Ireland. No, the bottleneck of Ireland. Anyway, it's like an old sort of town with not a whole lot going on. But I went to school first in a neighbouring town called Athlone, which is slightly larger. I went to an all boys school. Again, both centre of Ireland, like bullseye on the map of Ireland, and I didn't like the boys' school as much. I had a good time, but I found it was a bit negative. So I moved to this mixed school, in Moat with with Ogie, who we know mutually, and I enjoyed school. You know, I played a lot of Gaelic football, which is a big sport in Ireland, and I think that was sort of a good integrator to my new home. I had a good gang of buddies. It was a positive environment, I felt. Any interesting stories? No, used to mitch occasionally and go on the Raz. Anyway, I enjoyed school, I guess, in summary.
And so then what was the next step? You went to NUIG in Galway, right? Was that where you went to university?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, and I guess when I was thinking about this sort of CAO choice, which is like this mad concept in Ireland, where you don't actually write a application letter or think about where you want to go. You just look at a load of courses and pick one and say that's it. And they're often very specific. Like biomedical engineering is a very niche subset of engineering, so it's really hard to understand how like a 17-year-old who's spending most of his time thinking about going on the piss and playing football, it can think that far ahead about where he wants to go. So anyway, I ended up picking that largely because I had an aptitude for maths, and I liked biology, and had this crazy physics teacher who I really enjoyed, who was very high energy and happened to be my neighbor. So I enjoyed those three subjects the most, and I was like, okay, well, if I like those three subjects the most, therefore they map to this domain of expertise. But I don't think that's a very logical way to determine your life trajectory. But I guess if I look back on it, yeah.
I think it's probably the most common path that people tend to take, which is like, so I did the exact same thing and I ended up engineering, right? So not that I had any idea what an engineer did, but it was more like, yeah, maths and physics are cool. I'm half good at them. I'll go and do that, right? But you ended up, although it is, I agree with you, it's an absolutely crazy way to select what you want to do at university or, for the rest of your life. But you actually ended up working in that space. So it did actually seem to be a half decent choice. So if we jump forward a few years, like to ground people in what you do now, it did, yeah. So what do you how do you describe what you do now?
Yeah, so I didn't answer your last question very well either. I did go to NUIG, which is a college in the west of Ireland, and then I went from there to the US. I actually did a study abroad program type thing when I was in NUIG, and then I subsequently got a scholarship to go back for a master's program to the US, and I spent a bunch of time in the US before doing what I do now, which is I run a company called Ochre Bio. It's a RNA medicines company focused on liver disease. We're trying to develop new treatments for chronic liver disease, which is a big global public health challenge, somewhat stigmatized in the area of medicine, and affects huge numbers of people. One in third leading cause of premature death in much of the UK, right after cancer and cardiac death. So yeah, so I work in the field that I CAO'd my way into many moons ago.
There's someone in the CAO office who is listening to this and taking responsibility for your success and all future success of Ochre Bio with the system that they've developed. But okay, so I mean, I really want to dig into like what you do now, and kind of unpack that, because it sounds super cool, but I think people probably have no idea what an actual day in the life might look like, or journey. So I do want to unpack that, but let's talk a little bit about that journey from, CAO choice in university, going through university. But then what was your first job out of university? Because you obviously didn't found this company like straight away, right? So what did you do kind of straight out of uni?
Yeah, so after I did my biomedical related undergrad, I did a grad program in the US focused on commercializing new technologies. So basically, they were teaching engineers how to do business. And I always felt I wasn't a natural engineer. I don't know if you felt that in college. I was like, personality wise, I don't fit the engineer archetype, although I like the same subject areas. I felt more commercially minded. I don't know. So anyway, if it was a good fit for what I wanted to do after college, and I was always quite entrepreneurial by nature. I was even as a wee lad in the hills of Moat, would be trying to start up businesses. Ogie, who we have a friend in common, was an exceptionally entrepreneurial young man when we were 14, 15, organizing buses to discos, dances for all the lads. Anyway, I keep digressing. Sorry, I know you ask me very straightforward questions and I go on a whole other direction. I subsequently went to work for a management consulting firm after my college degree, after time in the US. And that was great. I know people take the piss out of it a bit as a domain, and it deservedly should be taking the piss out of it. But it's such a great training ground for business. Like if you want to do business at a high level, you just get tons of exposure really quickly to a variety of sectors and sort of challenges, and I think it's like a good sort of MBA for aspiring business people or entrepreneurs. So I did that for 3 years in the US, and I focused on healthcare. So I worked mostly with health technology companies or medical device companies or biopharma, biotechnology companies. And then I found after that experience that biotechnology was by far the most exciting sort of angle within the healthcare domain. It's just a really high impact piece of. I mean, you can have these profound impact on people's lives, and it's very kind of exciting because it's all sort of it feels a bit like what's a good analogy? It's just very fast paced and very ambitious, and can be really big or really not big, and you don't really know how it's going to go. A lot of risk, and my first job was a bookie. My granddad was a bookie. He had a bookmakers in Ireland, and I used to go in and clean the toilets or whatever when I was like 13. But I analogized these two roles because biotechnology, you're developing products through experimentation. So you just do not know what's going to work. And you do not know at each stage of the product development, you do not know if it's going to work. So it's like a big risk based decision criteria. It actually is a little bit like a bookie. Like you're taking bets all the time. You're like, do I think that drug is going to be successful? I don't know. Do I think that like experiment will help me de-risk it a bit? Yeah, I take a bet on that. How much does that cost? And it's like a big probability finance equation in a way. I mean, there's obviously a lot of science that goes into it, but the way I kind of, my role is largely around sort of how do we use our finances and resources to get us the best products and yada yada yada. So sorry, I make those probably analogies a little bit in jest, but it's something to think about.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's actually very interesting. I never really thought about it that way. But I guess it's very different to, something like a SaaS business, whatever else, right? Whereas like usually, like at least once you find product market fit, you've got an idea that it works, and it's about making it better, and then sort of the other parts of the business around, how good can you get at marketing and sales, and how good is your product and competitive. But this is there's a lot more unknowns in the field that you work in, and as you said, it's all about placing bets, right, and understanding like the relative probability and outcomes of those bets, which is interesting. I never thought about it that way.
I think it's the exact opposite of a tech business.
Okay, hold up 1 second. I'm sorry to have to interrupt this episode, but I do want to remind you that if you want more content on how to find a job and a life that you love, you can find it on our socials. So on Instagram, go to Two Roads Pod, and on LinkedIn, just find my personal account called Steve Duke. And of course, these podcasts are released weekly where I interview people, and that's extremely helpful for people to get inspiration and hear other people's stories and how they did it and what they're going through. But I also release a ton of other content as well to help you both figure out what it is that you want to do and also how to then make that actually happen. So LinkedIn and Instagram. At LinkedIn, Steve Duke, just my name. And then on Instagram, you can find us at Two Roads Pod.
And this, because I think a tech business, you create the market. You know you can build a product. If people will buy it and use it, you can build a business on the back of that. The technology is typically not the rate limiting factor, it's the market. Whereas in biotechnology, it's the exact opposite. The market is there. We know how many people have liver disease. We know there's no treatments for liver disease. We know if we develop a product that solves that, there will be a reimbursement and a price and a payment for that. But we do not know how to make that fucking product, and we do not know how to how successful it'll be. And there's all these complications around. Do we look at this particular biological mechanism? Do we use this particular chemistry? Do we test it in this particular clinical trial? Is that too high risk? Do the regulators agree with that endpoint? There's all these questions that you don't know the answer to, and there is no right answer. So you're basically taking loads of little bets, like compounding risk on top of each other, in the hopes that you make the right bets that ultimately get you to clinically approved products. And then there's a market there, so you don't have to create the market at all. So anyway, I think it's kind of like an interesting inversion of the thinking. And what it means is you're running a business that's completely based on experimentation. So like, you cannot predict anything. Like if the head of a BMW manufacturer couldn't tell you whether or not their cars were going to friggin' drive, that would be a really stressful job. So like, I cannot tell you if our drugs are going to work. I just have to try to do everything in my power to give ourselves and people confidence that it will work. So anyway, I think it's a really interesting world and a very stressful world at times.
So what does that mean, like, for you personally then, on like a day to day? Like, are you I presume you're looking at those kind of different like probability and like risk equations a lot, but then you mentioned an interesting point there, which is about like helping people to believe that it could be possible. So like, how do you kind of define your role leading the business, given especially what you're talking about there around the uncertainty of a lot of the outcomes that you're all working probably very hard towards?
I think my role is probably a few things. It is an advocate and a spokesperson for the science and the strategy and the approach and why people should believe this is going to work. That's most of what I do, is talking about how what we do is differentiated and is more likely to be successful than all the people who've tried and failed at liver disease in the past. I do think there's a resource allocation element to my role, in partnership with our scientific teams to figure out what's the best bet with the funding that we've raised, that we have to date. And then I think job of a CEO is a lot of sort of keeping everyone moving in the right direction. Like people, especially like highly intellectual scientists, sometimes have a tendency to go off course and try and fight each other, and like, you know, humans are like inherently complex, and my job is to kind of keep everyone going. Okay, you don't agree with this person, or you don't agree with that. Well, look, the decision's been made, and we're all moving in the one direction towards treatments for these patients who need it. Forget about all the other crap. Let's keep going. I think I do a lot of that, probably more than I should, but it's probably necessary to keep the boat moving in the right direction. So yeah, I think those are what I do spend a lot of my time doing.
That's interesting. I was talking to just the episode we released just today was with Philip Dorn, who's the CEO of HelloFresh, which is a very different business, right? But I was talking to him about like what does his day look like, his role, and he was like, it's all about relationships for him. It's all like hands on, like so much of it is hands on, just like managing the people that he works with, the partners, you know, his bosses, whatever else it would be. I think it's an interesting point that I don't know if people think of a CEO, if they think that's what they're doing all day is, you know, but I guess like, what does your day look like then? Are you just in meetings a lot with all these people? Like, what does an actual typical day, you know, maybe yesterday, the day before, for example, like what would that, if you could paint that picture for me, what does that look like?
I'm in meetings I mean, today I started this and I'm in meetings till 9 o'clock tonight. Just I've had like 10-minute breaks in between them. And that's not unusual. Like sometimes I was actually working till like midnight last night because I have to do a board deck outside of the 14 hours of meetings. Like it's an exceptionally difficult job. But I try to break it up such that
How do you do it?
you need to be slightly deranged, I think, to do it. Because it is an unnatural role. Like it's an unnatural amount of stress for a single individual to be the culmination of. So it's a really, because there's always problems. Like there's always urgent issues that you have to be able to resolve or think on your feet about how to address. And yeah, like you could get a phone call at the middle of the night from an investor looking for, you know, there's always stuff that's like going wrong, that you need to be able to solve for. But I think you got to love it. Like I think the thing that makes it possible is that you have particularly for me working in healthcare, maybe more, I mean, everyone has a mission, but I think for us, it's very clear. Like if we are successful, we're going to save potentially billions of people's lives. Like that's mental. Like that's what I think is so interesting about this sector is it's like so highly leveraged. Like if this company, if I put up with all the shit for another couple of years and we figure out a drug that actually treats liver disease, all of a sudden, like the third leading cause of premature death in the global industrialized world could be solvable. Like this is a death wish for the people who are diagnosed with liver disease. Unless they get a transplant, because there is very few available, there is no solution for these people. So it's like it's such an inspiring and motivating goal to be working towards. It's like hard to even articulate. So it's really nice to fall back on that when your experiments don't work and and there's loads of crap to deal with. But anyway, let me just comment on that again. Like I do carve out days where I don't take meetings. So on Tuesdays I don't take any meetings, and that is more of a focus day. And I'm like, okay, long-term corporate strategy. Where are we going to go with the product portfolio? Who do we need to bring in to help us mature the company? But yeah, a lot of it is meetings with the internal senior leadership team. There's a lot of ad hoc meetings with chair board members, And then there's a lot of investor presentations just to warm people up to the story and kind of be that advocate and spokesperson for the thesis. Um, yeah, and I think the bigger the company gets, the more I'm out of the weeds. I think that when I was earlier on in the journey, a lot of what I was doing was just complete and utter bull. It was just work that I didn't need to be doing. It was like a lot of doing the finances, helping with the HR. Whereas now, I think as a company grows, the CEO needs to fundamentally shift their behavior and archetype. Like you really become a spokesperson and a negotiator, a spokesperson, and a diplomat. Like you have to just be like very composed and thoughtful in high stress, high stress situations, and be that voice of like calm that moves everyone towards the same end, that reminds people of where we're ultimately going, and tries to sort of settle the natural organizational chaos that emerges of when a lot of people try to work together.
Is that something that you think you would naturally have been good at, or is it something that you've had to learn in the role?
I think there's a real toolkit to being a good CEO, and I think there are areas where I'm stronger than and there's areas where I'm weaker. I think an area that I'm weak is you need to be very, at times you need to be quite stern and assertive and clear and ultimately decisive, and sort of not be too decision by consensus. And I think I'm a very decision by consensus oriented person, and I have a natural strength in diplomacy, I think, and I like to talk, and I like people, and I like relationships. So I think that helps with the sort of cultural elements. But I think the key to being a really good CEO is having all of the tools, like the ability to get angry. I can't get angry, but sometimes you need to get angry. If someone's like really taking the piss, you need to say, "Hey, man, you need to cop the hell on. Like, stop doing that." But I can't. I really struggle with that emotion. But all of these is part of like a toolkit. Sometimes you need to be able to be extremely calm in extremely high stress situations. I'm actually very good at that. I never really get that worked up about things. But then you need to be also very clear thinking and strategic on your feet. Like if there's a big issue, you need to be able to, okay, we got to go this way and be decisive. And sometimes I'm okay at that. I'm getting better, but I'm okay at it. So I think the key to being a good CEO is having all of those tools, and then knowing what, and then being able to adapt to this, what the situation needs. So the situation needs to be calm down, deploy humor, like boom, okay, joke, and everyone laughs and it calms down the situation. Or the situation needs to be, no, we need very clear, decisive action here. Go, okay, you shut up, you shut up. This is the plan. We're going here. Boom. Okay, everyone gets on board. Let's go. Where I struggle with that side of the house when I'm better. I think you need to be able to read the situation and deploy the required sort of behavior. And I think I'm not quite there yet, but I'm starting to add some of those tools to the toolkit.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Well, there's almost like a meta skill there, right? Which is being able to like read the situation and then know which tool it is that you need to even pull out in the first place. So I think that's a cool way. Yeah, I think it's a cool way of describing it. But I'm interested. So you're talking there about like say the earlier days, right? When you're doing the finance and the HR and everything else. Those early days are moments that I'm very interested in, and I actually know a lot of people who listen to this are very interested in, because what a lot of people ask me is like, hey, like I'm going to go and do my own thing, but like I don't know what the very first step is. They might be confident that once they get in, like 6 months, 12 months down the line, the path is almost appearing in front of them, right? They've got a bit of momentum, but like, because we talked a little bit, right, about you kind of leaving college, joining management consulting, but like, what was the path between then and like founding the company, like practically? Like, what did you do? Like, did you just leave one day and it was like, right, that's it, open up your laptop and start working on it, or what happened?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and that's also the early days are probably the most fun, even though they're probably the most busy or whatever. But so for me, what I did, which is one way to do it, not is I did a program called Entrepreneur First. So I was looking for a new job. I was living in DC, and I was going, "Fuck this management consulting bollocks." I'm really in a cursy mood today. Sorry about that, but I was like, I'm sick of this. I need a new job, and I was just plugging out applications everywhere, and I found this program called Entrepreneur First in London, and it was like basically an accelerator program for people who didn't have any good ideas. And I was like, I don't have any good ideas. This is a great idea. Let's do this. This is my only good idea. So I applied to that, and they match you then with people who have a kind of technical aptitude. And they basically have three different archetypes of people. They have industry experts who've been in the industry for 20 years, that really know a particular domain. They've scientific or technical experts, people who've studied AI and PhDs and did really deep academic research or industry research on a particular technology. And then they have what they called catalysts. And these are just random people who are kind of energetic and entrepreneurial by nature and can maybe make stuff happen. And they throw them all, about 100 of these different archetypes, into a room and say, go speed date each other, meet each other, and see what business ideas you guys come up with. So I was like, great, I don't have any good ideas. All my ideas are terrible, but I'm very catalytic as a personality, perhaps. So and then I met a scientist with a very clear idea around liver disease, and I was like, great, let's rock and roll. and then from there, he was like, look, liver disease is really hard because we don't understand the biology. We don't have good preclinical models. Animal models don't work, and clinical trials are really hard. Those are the big challenges. So I was like, okay, well, how do we solve them? Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do big data to target discovery and use AI and computational tools to study the disease. We're going to use human tissue-based models, not animal models, to really study our therapies and make sure they're actually going to work in humans, not in mice. And then finally, we're going to think about clever clinical trials that are short-term and get us to proof of principle quickly. And I was like, love it. Okay, now we had the plan in place for what the business was going to do. And we did the two kind of co-founders in place. And then we were like, well, let's get rock and rolling. And then it was just sort of mapping out the pitch deck. Okay, here's our story. Well, if we want to go ask for money from investors, what do we need to be able to prove to people? How do we convince them that this is going to actually work? Okay, well, we need to maybe do we need to get our pitch right. And we got like 100K off of this accelerator program. And that gave us a base to go, okay, well, then we need to do these experiments and this little bit of research to just show that there's something in this idea, just give people something to believe in. Okay, we got this. And we did a very basic sort of experimental workup to say, okay, if we test in humans rather than mice, we get a different readout. People went, okay, I kind of get where you're going with this. And then we got more money, and then we got more money, and then the company kind of goes from there. And you got to kind of figure out, like, what is that evidence or that de-risking that you need to give people enough confidence in you and the team to give you money. And I think the benefit I had, which is a substantive benefit in the early days, was that my co-founder was a highly credible scientist. So people kind of saw his research and said, okay, I could take a punt on this guy. He does seem very capable. And I think that is a very valuable thing for early companies, because there's a lot of people who go, I'll start a business, I'll start another whatever back-end tech software business, but then it's actually hard to convince people that you're the right guys to solve it. And the thing that was good about us in the early days was that it was a really random niche idea, and we had a really random niche dude who knew a lot about the niche area. And I was kind of like, look, this is a random niche area, but guys should take a look at it. And I don't know. That was like one of the benefits, I think, in the early days. Sorry, I'm rambling now.
It's interesting to hear that story.
But yeah, I think that getting started is just pitch deck. I think pitch deck is where it starts, right? And then building relationships.
Yeah, and I imagine, like, for the field that you work in, that's probably even more important, right? Because it's like, if you're starting a software business, sure, you like a pitch deck can help, but like a lot of even the early stage investors are going to need some sort of proof, because you're going to be able to build, if it's a simple piece of software, not a simple piece, but like if it's software, you can get started without a whole load of money. You can code something, you can get going. I imagine in your field that's not the case, right? You're going to need like a lot of money before you can actually start to move things along. So is that what, like, I'm interested in kind of, if you were to think of like the journey on this business on, say, like a ladder, right? And at the end of it, there's this massive, like at the top of the ladder, like this massive prize where you're able to significantly reduce like liver disease all around the world. Like, do you have any idea of knowing where you are on that ladder, or are you just going to keep climbing until hopefully you get there?
So that's a great question. So there is a very clear process to get there. But there is risks along the way, and you don't really know. I guess that's a good analogy, actually. You don't know which of your handles are going to break along the way. Like you can map it out. Like there's basic discovery, there's like medicine, there's like develop the medicine, there's like test the medicine, it's like, okay, do final testing of medicine, there's like first in human, there is a ladder. but you don't know which is going to break. And the more work you do at the bottom, the more higher the likelihood that the top is actually more stable. But if you do too much work on the bottom, then you're never going to get to the top because no one's going to give you the fucking money because you haven't made any progress up the ladder. So, and then there's like a constant tension at each step because the people at that step are like, this is the best step, right? You don't need to leave this step. I'm like, no, we do need to leave this step. We're going to that. We're going up to the top of the ladder. And then there's like, you got to kind of fight off people on the way up to the ladder.
You're really taking that analogy to the next level, which I like. Okay, but are you like, you know, bottom fifth, bottom third, like bottom half? Where roughly do you think it is?
We're moving. We're taking. Yeah, we're making big moves. We're probably about a half. Yeah, I think a half. Probably a third to a half of the way up the ladder.
I'm interested in, like, you'd say, you know, you're talking about like 14-hour days, working till 12 o'clock last night, on calls all day today till 9 p.m. When I've worked with, you know, CEOs and founders, they work these crazy lives, and from the outside in, you look at it and you go, that's bonkers. Like, how do you do that? I couldn't force myself to do that. My read is that they don't even think about it because they love it and they're so obsessed with it, and it's just their life, and like they couldn't do anything else. Right. So it's not like they're sitting down, they're making themselves work these hours. It's just what they do. Is that, do you find that the case for you, or is it something else where you actually are like sometimes forcing yourselves to put in the hours because that's what you signed up for?
No, I have to stop. Like I think probably a lot of people have like an addictive personality, maybe, but I have to physically stop myself. Like I cannot. It's weird. Like it's really, really weird. I would for a long. I mean, it still happens, but I'm kind of getting better at controlling it. But I would like wake up in the middle of the night and be like, okay, I've got to send this fucking email. Like I'm like, what are you doing? Go to sleep, man. And it's like it is like an addiction. Like it is it's like a proper addiction. um and yeah, I think, I don't know, it depends on the person. I'm getting better. I think that's also like a CEO can't behave like that. I think there's this difference between a founder and a CEO. I'm trying to become a CEO, and I'm really a founder at heart, and I'm like trying to go on this journey to become a more mature CEO, because a more mature CEO doesn't fucking wake up in the middle of the night thinking about it. Maybe they do. I don't know. But I think it is a part of the job. You know, you're just under a lot of pressure, and there's a lot of things that you have to do to drive the business forward. So you kind of sign up for it, and you kind of, and then I think after a while of doing it, you actually don't even notice it anymore. You're like you kind of like, it just becomes your day. Like you know, you go to work, and you come back, and maybe you go for dinner, and then you just go back to work, and like that's kind of it's a bit weird, yeah. And what was I going to say? I had a thought there. Yeah, I think the thing is though, you realize your limits, so, and you get kind of very good at optimizing for like how to maximize your output. So like I am way more sharp in the morning, so I'll do a lot of my like harder work or harder meetings or more like, you know, in the morning, and then I'm kind of slower in the afternoon. So I book all my kind of check-ins and sort of less intense meetings then, and then I slow down a lot from like seven, from like 5:30 to 7 maybe. So then I come to go for food or try to do something social, and then I turn on again at like 7:30 for like 3 hours, and then I'll give it another boost burst, and then I pass out. And then I kind of figured out my rhythm. And then the other thing is I need to take a decent break every 3 months. If I don't take a decent break, I become I'm like really unclear in my mind. So I like will do like a week or two off every 3 months and be like, okay, now I come back and I'm like properly ready to rock again. And I can feel myself over that period. I'm like, go, 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 go. And then I slowly start to go, okay, no, this isn't working for me now. I need to take a break. And then boom, I'm like off for a while, and then I feel a lot better.
That's cool. Your day sounds like almost like that of a toddler or something, you know? It's just like go, 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 stop for dinner, keep going, pass out, you know, wake up again the next day and do it all again. which I kind of like. um but that's, yeah. I'm interested to know like a bit more on, like, that's kind of obviously on the work side of things, right? And you're clearly spending a lot of time at it. But Do you kind of have, for the want of a better word, like a life philosophy or any sort of set of structures that you kind of refer to when you're making decisions, like whether it was to join Entrepreneur First or like co-found this business and lead it and whatever else, or are you just a bit more kind of like play what's in front of you and just go with the flow?
I have three things I tend to optimize for with all my big life decisions. One is how is this going to leave the world a better place than I found it? Is it like an impactful endeavor? And that tends to be, even when I was going into consulting, I thought healthcare as a domain is like a very impactful space. And I don't think I'm going to leave it. I may go into, I used to do some work in global development as well. I think that's a very impactful work and economic empowerment around the world. Anyway, that's like those like big picture focus. And then the second is, am I going to be really challenged by this work or this project or whatever this is? Is it going to really push me? And I think that I don't know. That's like a self-masochistic thing. I don't know where that comes from because none of my family have it. My family are all like teachers and really, really chilled and like so. So I have like this weird innate like desire for just to just challenge myself a lot. And that goes to like doing marathons, doing stand-up comedy, forcing myself to go to the gym at ridiculous hours in the morning. And it's like a self-infliction obsession. Anyway, I don't know what that is about. And then the last one is it going to be good crack? Like, am I going to have a good fucking time doing it? And if I'm not, if those three things aren't met, I won't do it typically. So like that goes back to like comedy or whatever, or like poetry. I always like anyway. There's like a lot of things where I find joy, and I try to like map them into those sort of big questions.
Yeah. What are some of those things then?
I started doing stand-up comedy recently, again, out of this like just really wanted to force myself to do it, even though it made me really uncomfortable. And then I kind of enjoyed it in the end. I think it's like quite a fun thing. What else have I been doing? I do like long endurance, like long runs and cycling and so on for cycled to Oxford from London recently, and not really a difficult one, but I'm a big fan of poetry. I love a good poem. Really something in the Irish genes there. So I spent it as another sort of daily routine. I tend to like close out my day listening to poems, and that sort of helps me calm down and fall asleep. There's a really good podcast called Poetry Abound by another Irishman that I like quite a lot. And yeah, what other? I like reading a lot too. I try to read before I go to bed too, to try to slow my mind down and also sort of, I read like novels and like not work related stuff. So stuff that like makes the heart go boom, I read this amazing book that I just finished that like kept me up all night, which is really unhealthy because I need to sleep. But it was called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, and it's about these two folks who co-found a gaming company in the 90s, and it's like their journey, the two individuals and a third individual, and it's like so beautifully accurate about the challenges of co-founder relationships, number one, but it also is incredibly moving and probably the most beautifully written book I've ever read, and would recommend it to all your listeners.
I'm going to check that out myself, actually. But to go back to what you're saying about like the three reasons, so I love those three reasons. I think it's great, and you kind of have to have all three before you go and do something, which is cool. The first one that you have, right, that it's going to leave the world in a better place. Why is that so important to you? Because a lot of people, I think, have or might want to have that motivation. But like, why is it actually important to you versus the other two of, for doing something challenging or having a load of fun? Why is that first one so important?
Yeah, I don't know. I've always sort of felt that. Like I used to do a bunch of, when everyone was going on J1s in college, I went to Nepal to do development work, and I went to Tanzania to do development work, and I always, and even when I was like in school, I was trying to get to Uganda for some program, but like mother wouldn't let me go. I can't remember, but I've always been, I've always like wanted to. I don't know. Kindness is like an important sort of theme for me. I think it's kindness is, and even in like personal relationships and stuff, like I just think kindness is such a fucking important attribute in the world. We don't have enough kindness on this earth. Um, and I don't know, maybe I get it from my dad's a very kind man. Like he's so opposite to me in almost every way, but he's very kind. And I think that maybe was an inspiration to me when I was growing up. My mother is also kind. She's a bit more erratic, which I can relate to. But she's also quite, I don't know, maybe and I had like a bunch of fucking priests in my, I know they weren't particularly kind, but I guess there's like, maybe it's something genetic. I don't know. I don't know why that's important to me, but maybe it's raring in that. I don't know.
Given your description of your parents, I'm starting to wonder if we are perhaps brothers, long lost brothers. I have a very similar situation where I would say,
Really?
yeah, for sure. Like my dad's actually from Roscommon, so he's not a million miles away from where you're from. And
Maybe we are cousins.
yeah, but very much has that. That's one of the things I would have taken from him. Is just like a very kind man. Would have worked as a teacher, like all his life. Would be, I mean, completely different to him in so many ways. But like that kind of kindness is something that I think is quite nice. And I agree with you. Like, no matter what you're doing, like I actually get really pissed off sometimes where there's something you'd be doing in work or in life or whatever, and it's like, okay, it didn't work out for whatever reason, but like there was no need for that person not to be kind. Like no matter what you're doing, you can always be kind, even if you have to do something really shit. You can be kind. You can do it in a nice way. Like, and so I agree with you on that one.
You can. You can even do anger in a kind way. Like you're really pissing me off. Look, let's talk about why this is a problem. You can always make it kind. You never have to be insulting. You never have to be cruel. Yeah, I really don't think you do.
I very much agree with that. I've got probably just two more questions before we wrap up, Jack.
Go for it. Yeah.
So the first one would be like if someone is, say, in college or in their first couple of years out of college, and they're considering the path that you've gone down, right? So whether that be, an accelerator type thing like Entrepreneur First, or else just like founding their own business, like a venture-backed business where they're really going to go for it. What would you say to them before they make that leap? Either to make sure that it is something that they want to do, or, hey, make sure to watch out for XYZ because it's something I never thought about and it's kind of important.
Relationships, like people that you work with, are the most important thing for your own mental sanity. So like really investing in building a super strong foundation. And the problem if you're going to start something with someone is that you're going to disagree on almost like daily. You're going to constantly disagree about the decisions and directions the company is going. And they're going to get more serious the larger and more consequential the decisions become. And you have to find a way to disagree in a healthy way. Like you got to find, everyone has different combat styles. Like some people are more retreat, some people are more aggressive, and there's like natural tendencies, but you have to find a way to do it that ultimately everyone comes away going, okay, I get the decision. I think it's the best decision for the business. It's about the business. It's not about me or you. It's not about either of our personalities or egos or whatever. It's about what is going to be the right decision for the business, and that truth seeking or that desire for the best outcome wins every time, irrespective of our independent views on the topic. So I think like really investing in how to have healthy conflict early on, I think is important, and maybe a lesson for me. I don't think we did a great job of that. And I think, yeah, just really being on the same page and like deeply understanding the people that you're going to be around all the time and making sure that you're like 100% bulletproof. And it's easy to be nice, it's easy to be friendly and nice, and like you guys get on, you go for a beer, but like at the core, when push comes to shove, do you really have each other's, like, are you going to be tight, and how are you going to get on? Are you going to deal with the challenges and like the relationship challenges that are inevitable in a highly intense sort of startup build environment? I don't know. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but I think that's for me a lesson.
No, I think that's a really great piece of advice. I think you could actually do a whole podcast episode on how to actually do that, because I think it's hard, but I completely agree that it's important. I haven't founded a startup, but I've worked at them, and I know that if you have that culture and that ethos of like being able to just, We actually had it at McKinsey where it was very like the best answer wins and it's not personal, and we can have like big arguments about a problem, but none of it is personal. I thought that like you were just able to get to such good answers from that, and then everybody would leave, and you could have a raging argument with somebody, and then straight after it's like, right, we go grab a beer. Yeah, Grant.
That is, I think consulting is so good for that. Like, and the way they give feedback, it's so constructive. You know, and I didn't realize how hard this is outside of that environment. And I think it's partially because people are young and they want to learn, and they're also like straight A, super smart people who are like, okay, how do I get better? How do I get? And they want to get better. Whereas, like in the real world, like that's not always. People are older. People are more like recalcitrant to feedback and like more. This is the fucking way I've always done it. Fuck you. It's like, hold on a minute. Like we need to get here collectively. Like you know, and it actually becomes really, really hard. I think McKinsey, and maybe that's why they're. I know people love to take the piss out of them, and I think they probably deserve it. But at the same time, the management consultants are good at management, and it's like, how do we have unemotional, clear debates, like get to a clear resolution that's the best interest of everyone in the business? How do we like give feedback that's constructive and puts the person's development at the heart, but doesn't shy away from being critical, you know, and is very blunt. Like, and all those like basics are so, and it's just so much more fun. I know that particular environment is quite tense as well, but it's really easy when everyone acts like that. It makes the whole work of running a business just infinitely more easier and more productive.
Completely agree. It's definitely the part of McKinsey that I probably missed the most. It's funny. I was having this conversation with my mum the other day. I was driving in the car and I was asking her about the podcast because I always just want to get feedback on it, which is kind of left over from McKinsey. And I'm like, you know, what do you think about it? Like, what could I do better? Whatever else. And she's like, oh, it's great. No, it's great. It's fantastic, and you do this so well, and that's great. And I was like, that's wonderful, mom, and I know you're my mom, so you have to say that, but like it's fairly useless to me. Like I need to know what I can do better in it. And so I think that's definitely a hangover from my McKinsey days, that kind of craving of feedback. But we've got one more question before we wrap up, which is, and you may not have thought about this one because well, you just mightn't have, but if there's somebody, say, in their 20s and whatever they're doing, they're not loving it, they're like, it's grand, right? Or maybe they hate it, but they don't know what it is that they really might want to do. What would you say to that person?
I mean, part of me says I got lucky. Like, I took a punt, I took a risk, but I actually do love what I do, and it's very rewarding, and I'm really enjoying it. And I was exactly that person. I think most people in their like mid 20s or early 20s go, okay, I'm either leaving college, don't know what I want to do, or I've done a job for a couple of years and I don't really like it that much anymore, and I want to think of something more impactful or more exciting to go and do. And like what worked for me may not work for, probably doesn't work for most people, but I took a punt and I like gave up the well-paid job, gave up my American visa, and was like, I'm fucking moving to London and I'm going to get no money and go on this random accelerator program and hope it works out. And it did work out, but that was a risk. And then I didn't pay myself, I took a significant salary hit, and I was living in an apartment in London that was £200 a month. That's how fucking tight I was. I'm still a tight fucker. But and then I think that bet, I guess it's like a risk profile thing, but like taking a big bet can sometimes pay off. It could have ended up going nowhere, and then I just given up whatever whatever I had. But I think a bit of risk tolerance is probably a good thing for most people because it puts you slightly unfair advantage. And the other thing I tell people is like talk, network like fuck. Like you meet people who are doing interesting things, and like just reach out to them, and they might not take your call, but they might say, okay, let's go for coffee, or and try and make it personalized to increase your odds of success with that. But I think meeting people and spending time with people and sort of building your network is like inevitably going to be increase your serendipity odds. I don't know, that would maybe my parting advice. And have fun.
I think that's good. I think we've come full circle to understanding risk and probabilities. But I think it is good advice that but especially in your 20s, right? I think it's easy. It's obviously easy to say, but it's like of all the times, it probably is the time where you can ramp up the risk appetite a little bit more because worst case scenario, you do something for a few months and you fall back and you go back to what you were doing before, something similar. So I think that's it's actually pretty decent advice. So Jack, thanks so much for coming on for the chat. I really enjoyed it. If people want to learn more about you or follow you or the journey with the business, where's best for them to go?
Yeah, I do a little bit of tweeting, Jack_O_Mara. And then LinkedIn is probably good too. And I have an Instagram, but I don't really use it very much. But yeah, hit me up. Always happy to chat. And thank you so much for having me, Stephen. It was a pleasure talking.
I hope you enjoyed that chat that I just had with Jack. I told you he's a funny guy. And well, yeah, I was laughing a lot throughout the whole episode. A few interesting things that I took away from this. So I think the first one was when I asked him about, what skills do you need to be good as a co-founder and as a CEO? And he says it's all about managing relationships, your ability to, be a diplomat and to get people all aligned on the same direction, the same solution, even if they don't all agree. And that seems to be a common trend coming up with like people that I talk to. Philip Dorn said the same thing, right? He's another CEO and says it's all about managing, building, maintaining those relationships and getting people aligned. And so it seems to be this common theme that keeps coming up as a very, very important soft skill if you want to lead a business and something that people should think about developing. I think the second thing that I really loved about the chat was when I asked him, what's your framework for making decisions? And he was like, well, I need these three things before I do anything, right? He wants to have a really big positive impact on the world. He wants something that's challenging for himself, right? Something where he's really going to learn and feel tested. And then the third one was just about, it's going to be good crack. And if for anybody who's not Irish, that means good fun. And I think of all of them, I love the third one the most because I think a lot of times we look at things very rationally and we want to make an impact or make good money or learn or whatever else. And of course, those are all really important. But I think there's so much to be said for just making sure that you're having fun in whatever you're doing. And I love that was, of all the things that he considers, that was a top three. I asked him, of course, about if there was somebody in their 20s or 30s and they're trying to figure out what they wanted to do, what would his advice be? And his first one was about, being willing to take risks, turning up that risk appetite a little bit and taking the leap. Because as he said himself, if he didn't take the leap to go into entrepreneur first, he never would have ended up where he is now in a job that he seems, pretty obsessed with and really, really enjoys. And, he didn't know what was going to come out the other side of entrepreneur first when he went into it, if anything. And so it was very much a leap of faith. And I think there's a lot to be said for that, for just taking a bit of a leap, turning up that risk profile, especially if you're in a position where you can accept a little bit more risk. And then the second piece of advice he said was about just getting to know people, right? And that's what kind of I'm hoping to do a little bit with this podcast is I'm getting to meet new, interesting people like Jack, but then also kind of introducing them to the audience as well. And so I would say if you're interested in an area, a cold DM or a cold email can really go a long way. You might send 10 and only get one response, but that one response, you might learn a lot from that person and you might find something interesting or start to expand your network through them. So I think it's really important. If you're not sure what to do, it's a great way to just go out, meet some new people, talk to them, figure out what sort of jobs are out there as well. So that's all for this week. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you want to follow along on socials for more content, you can follow my personal account at Steve Duke on LinkedIn. And then on Instagram, you can get the podcast account, which is at 2 Roads Pod. Awesome. Well, I hope you enjoyed this week, and I will see you next week with the next episode of 2 Roads.